Hey everyone! I know I'm a little late to the party with this RTX 2080 repaste and repad video, but when I needed one, I couldn't find anything specific to this card. So if you're in the same situation, this guide is for you. While researching, I did find a photo on Reddit that supposedly shows the pad thickness dimensions for Gigabyte's customer support. Armed with that info, I decided to go all in and order a large sheet of RTX excellent TP3 thermal pads to get started. And of course, first up, disassembling the card. This part is pretty straightforward, just remove all the screws you see on the backplate. But be careful, the screws are different sizes, so it's a good idea to catalog them. Personally, I use the ribs on the back of an iFixit case lid to organize them by size and location. It's a simple but effective way to avoid losing track of what goes where. And once the screws are out, you'll be able to easily pull the card apart and access the PCB and the thermal pads. Now, let's talk a bit about those thermal pads. For anything other than GDDR6X memory, I believe the best value on the market are RTX TP3 thermal pads. Just to be clear, this isn't a paid promotion, I genuinely think that these are some of the best pads you can buy. They don't list their thermal conductivity in watts per meter Kelvin, which is a bit odd, but I suspect they're somewhere around 7 watts per meter Kelvin. Now, that might seem low compared to something like Gelid's 13 watts per meter Kelvin, but that number isn't the full story. You see, RTX TP3 pads have excellent thermal conductance and are super soft. Softer in fact than my previous favorite, the Gelid Extreme. These are ideal for almost everything on a GPU. Memory modules, VRM circuitry, voltage regulators, anything except GDDR6X. So if you are dealing with GDDR6X, do yourself a favor and spend the extra cash on Gelid Extreme pads. They're 3 times the price, but for the higher heat output of GDDR6X, it's absolutely worth it. Before I apply the new pads and paste though, I need to clean the heatsink because, well, it's pretty disgusting. I'll give it a good rinse with warm soapy water. This part isn't difficult, just be sure to dry it completely before starting the reassembly. Now, let's move on to clean the PCB. I use isopropyl alcohol and a soft bristle toothbrush to scrub up the old thermal paste. Here you can see the old thermal paste is completely dried out and cracked. A clear sign someone previously repasted this card with some garbage tier thermal paste. And this step is critical. Take your time and use plenty of alcohol. You don't want to apply too much pressure or force any thermal paste laden alcohol under the components. Just let the alcohol do most of the work for you. If you have PCB cleaner on hand, that's also a great option, but I prefer alcohol for this job since I haven't done any soldering here. Now it's time to measure and cut the new thermal pads. I ordered a large sheet of RTX TP3 pads since I work on older GPUs, but smaller packs are available if you're just doing one card. One of the nice things about these pads is their versatility. If you need thicker pads, say for the back, like 2 or 3 mm, you can just stack them without any penalty. For cutting, I recommend a sharp X-Acto knife, as the clear protective layer on these pads can be tough to cut through, but a decent cutter will also do. Just don't use scissors, as they will make a mess of the pads. Here's a little trick. Place a piece of cardboard on your cutting mat. It not only protects the mat, but also makes cutting easier, as you can stab slightly into the cardboard for more precise control. For this 2080, I'm going with 1mm pads throughout most of the card, but for the 2 specific controllers, which are listed as needing 0.5 and 0.75mm pads, I'm using thermal putty instead. Why? Well, those controls aren't anywhere near the stated height, and using putty simplifies the process. Thermal putty is essentially a soft moldable pad that fills any gap you have. The downside is that it's slightly less effective than normal thermal pads, but for this rather low wattage controllers, putty is more than sufficient. Now the most important part, applying thermal paste to the GPU die. You'd be surprised how many GPUs I've seen with overheating issues just because someone used cheap thermal paste. The problem with the super cheap eBay or AliExpress thermal paste isn't necessarily their thermal conductivity, is that they dry out and become rock solid, turning into insulators instead of helping with heat transfer. This GPU was no exception. You need to make sure that you apply a consistent, even layer of thermal paste over the entire GPU die. In this case, I'll be using a high quality paste to ensure long-lasting performance. With the paste and pads in place, it's time to reassemble the card. Before I fully tighten the screws, I'm going to do something that might seem counterproductive. I'll lightly press the card together and take it apart again. This lets me check if everything is making proper contact. In this case, my pads are a little thicker than needed, so I'm focusing mostly on the die area to ensure good pressure. One extra step I take is to push the thermal paste into the heat pipe grooves of the cooler. This particular design makes it hard to get the hotspot to edge delta below 14 to 15 C due to the uneven surface. I've seen this issue before, especially with MSI Gaming X Trio cards, which is one of the worst offenders at the high end. Now let's finish putting it all back together. Make sure to tighten the screws around the GPU in an X pattern to apply even pressure on the die. Once it's all secure, it's time to test. I'm happy to report that this worked perfectly. The edge to hotspot temperature delta is about 14C, which is as good as it gets with this cooler design. If you're curious about full performance benchmarks, you can check out my previous PC build video for all the details. And that's it, the card is running cooler and the process was relatively simple. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.